So love. A curious little emotion, isn't it? Love for decades has gotten people in trouble. Love has started wars. Love's a curious little emotion. But before I go much further, I got to tell you guys something. I don't know about the rest of the congregation, but I love being able to come into church now and seeing a color of hair different than gray. Really. I love it. And because of that, I've been watching you guys. Okay? For the past few Sabbaths, I've been watching you guys. And if the rest of the church wants to know and see love, watch this group. Watch this group. They have fun in church. They're enjoying the song service. And you can tell they all love each other and they have great love and respect for Mr. West. So if you want to focus on love, watch these guys. I appreciate that, guys. I appreciate that. So what does it mean to love God with all of our hearts, with all of our soul, with all of our minds? How do we love God that way? If I was to ask you, my granddaughter's here today, if I was to ask Chloe what love is, Chloe would have an idea of what love is. She's 10 years old, but she knows what love is. She's had the love of her mom, the love of her grandparents, the love of Tyler, the love of her Aunt Abby. She's had a lot of love around her. She knows what love is as a 10-year-old. If I was to ask Cody, tell me what love is. Cody has an idea of what love is. Because love his dad, the love of his friends, the love he's had in relationships. He has an idea of what love is. If I was to ask Jack and Dina, what is love? They would have still a different view of love than what Cody would have or what Chloe would have because of life experience. Because the things we experience in life grows love. Love needs to be watered and nurtured and cared for, just like we do, in order for it to grow. So today, and I hate doing this because I always get a little choked up when I do, but there's a big box of Kleenex here, so I'm good. I'm going to share a little bit of personal experience with you like I usually do. But I'm probably going to get a little more personal than maybe some of you are comfortable with. And that's okay. Because sometimes we need to open ourselves up. And we need to show people, especially when we got young adults sitting here, Wes, I think you'd agree. They need to know, and you guys need to know, that although I'm up here preaching, and though I've been an elder in this church for over 20 years, I still have problems. I still struggle with life. I still make mistakes. And I still need love every day, and I need the love of God every day in order to keep me moving forward. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me at all. I'm not asking you to go, oh man, that's really too bad. I'm asking you to take a lesson out of what I'm trying to teach you so we can move forward in love. Okay? I want you to consider for a minute the life of a caterpillar. And if I get choked up here, you guys are going to think, that's kind of weird, you're talking about a caterpillar, but there's a reason behind it that a few people in this church know. So, think of the life of a caterpillar. Caterpillar is born on a plant, its little its egg is laid on the bottom side of a leaf or top side of a leaf, and this caterpillar hatches. And this caterpillar's got two things on its mind and two things on its mind only. Eating. I've got to eat. I've got to grow. And the other thing is I've got to change. Kind of sounds like us as Christians, doesn't it? I got to eat, I got to grow, I got to change. So he starts to eat. And here's the thing about the caterpillar. He's got a lot of little tiny legs, and he's got really short legs, and he's really close to the ground. And he stays near the ground, he stays near that leaf, he can't get up and see anything else. That's all he's concentrating on is eating. Now caterpillars are kind of cool because some caterpillars are really, really ugly. And some caterpillars are really, really beautiful. Some caterpillars look like they have hair, and some caterpillars look like they have no hair. Some caterpillars are very toxic, and some caterpillars are not. But they all do the same thing. They eat and they want to change. That's it. And the problem with caterpillars, if caterpillars never did come to the point of change, or they never die and get killed off by birds or being stepped on or other things, if they just continued on as caterpillars, they would eat and destroy the host that they're on, that plant that they're on. They eat and destroy it, and they move on. And they eat and they destroy and they move on. And they eat and they destroy and they move on. And all they want to do, and the only reason why they keep eating, is they keep wanting to change. But they can't change. Oh, they try. In a caterpillar's lifetime, 4 or 5 times, he'll grow so big he has to shed his outer shell, and he grows a new one. But he's the same stinking caterpillar he was before. He hasn't changed. He's bigger now and he eats more. And he can't change. And I imagine for a caterpillar, if I was a caterpillar, that'd get kind of depressing after a while. I want to change. I want to be something different. I don't want to be this caterpillar anymore. I don't want to just keep eating plants until I destroy a plant and then move on to another plant. That's not love and that's not life, and I want something more. But the caterpillar doesn't know how to change. So eventually the caterpillar gets so depressed, he just stops eating. He hangs upside down. And he wraps himself in a little shell. Now, some people think it's a cocoon. It's not a cocoon. That's for moths. It's a chrysalis. It's a harder shell than what a cocoon is. Cocoon's a little softer and you can tear it apart easier. So he wraps himself up. And it's not until the point that caterpillar stops trying and sits in silence in the dark when he thinks nothing else is going to work and nothing's going to change, that the caterpillar finds change. Now, the caterpillar doesn't change because of anything he's doing. There's enzymes and cells inside that caterpillar that once he finally stops trying, they start working on him from the inside out. It's nothing he can do or she can do. I don't want to sexualize a caterpillar. But there's nothing he or she can do. They just sit there in the dark and let the change take place. Now, for some caterpillars, the change takes place fairly quickly in a few days. And some caterpillars, it's a few weeks. Do you know there's a caterpillar out there that takes 2 years to develop? Think about that, 2 years. And think about the lifespan of I'm having a hard time today. Think about the lifespan of a caterpillar is. 2 years is probably a really long time. Okay? But once that caterpillar finally gets to the end, he wakes up one day and goes, I feel different. I really feel good. And I feel a little crowded in here. And he starts to crack out of his little chrysalis. I got wings. This is cool. And he stretches those wings out, and he lets them dry in the sunshine, and then he pumps them, and they get full of blood. And then he stretches up on his legs, and he goes, oh, I've got long legs. I'm not crawling around on the ground anymore on my belly. This is really cool. And I got these cool antennae, and I look nothing like I did before. I am now beautiful. I'm a beautiful being. I'm a beautiful butterfly. And then he takes off and flies up above everything that he was crawling around on before. And this is really cool. Now I'm up above all. And I see things so much differently now. And the world is beautiful out there. I'm not having to worry about getting stepped on by people walking around, or by dogs, or getting picked on by chickens or birds or anything else. I'm flying, I'm free. And then the butterfly goes, uh-oh, here's that hunger thing again. Because after all, butterflies got to eat too. And last time I ate anything, I just destroyed it. But I'm hungry. And the butterfly sees a flower. And he swoops down to that flower and he lands on the flower. And he goes, I don't want to eat this flower. I want to dip up some of this wonderful nectar. And the butterfly drinks up some of that beautiful, wonderful, sweet, wonderful tasting nectar. And when he does it, he doesn't kill the flower. He just drinks a little bit of the nectar. And he gets that nourishment and he goes, oh, that's really good. And he takes off and flies again. What the butterfly doesn't realize is that he's also collected pollen from that flower. And he flies to another flower, and he goes to get some nectar, and while he's there, he inadvertently leaves some of the pollen behind that he got from the other flower. And that flower then is able to mature and grow into seeds and make other flowers. And all of a sudden, this butterfly inadvertently has spread this pollen all over a garden, and flowers are blooming everywhere, and it's beautiful. And life for the butterfly is now beautiful. He's no longer that caterpillar. I want to tell you today that that's the kind of transition that God wants us to have. That's what He wants us to have today. Because if we can have that kind of transition in our lives, we'll be able to love the Lord God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our mind. It's really that simple. It really is. But how do we get there? How do we get to that point? You see, there's a little problem, and that's Satan. And I'm going to tell my young adults here right now. Satan doesn't want you guys being here at all. He really doesn't. And he definitely doesn't want you to have your butterfly moment. Not at all. And so I can guarantee the more you are here, and I'm not trying to scare you off, I'm trying to encourage you, believe it or not, the more you are here, the more he is going to try to interrupt that butterfly moment for you. And it's not just you guys, it's all of us too. You're going to hear about later with me. It's all of us. He doesn't want us here. He doesn't want you coming here knowing you're appreciated being here. He doesn't want you guys to experience this love that he wants. He wants you to think this miserable world we live in is all there is. And that's all we get. And so why even try? And Satan's done that from the very beginning. As a matter of fact, Satan did that in the very beginning, and he does it continually with us with the phrase, if I were you. If I were you. Do you believe me? Turn your Bibles with me to Genesis chapter 3. The very first book in the Bible. And we're going to start with verse 1. Now the serpent, or the devil, was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord had made. And he said to the woman, Eve, God has indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, you won't die. God knows that the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So if I were you, Eve, that's what he said. It's not in the Bible, but I know it's what he said. If I were you, Eve, I'd eat that fruit, and then you could be like God. You could know what God knows. Trust me, sometimes we don't want to know what other people know. Okay? I'll just put that out there to you. And so Eve ate of the fruit, and sin came into this earth, and we've been dealing with that character Satan and that phrase, if I were you, ever since. And that has gotten us in so much trouble and continues to get us in trouble. Let me switch gears a little bit. How many of you use social media of some fashion? Face chat, Snap, Facebook, Instagram, Grok, or whatever they are, right? I don't know. There's so many of them out there, right? I use Facebook. I use Snapchat. See, I got it right. I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's a great source of staying in contact with people, is it not? I have family members. I have a 97-year-old aunt I haven't seen in probably 40 years that I get a checkup on and hear about. And it's great. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what she's going on. She lives up in Idaho, and I haven't seen her forever. I got friends from high school I haven't talked to since high school, but I get to see what they're doing and know what they're doing, know what their families are doing, and see how they're doing. And for a lot of you, I don't have this issue quite so much, but I have friends with some of you, and I see your Facebook pages. Some of you have friends you probably even have no idea who they even are, except for on Facebook or Snapchat. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't know how you keep track of all of them. I'm a little more picky. I keep my friends in life a very small group, and I keep them on Facebook just a small. But it's good to have that. It's good to have that common ground with people and know what they're up to. But social media can also be a pain in the neck. It can be a great source of pain, confusion, hatred, anger, like we're seeing lately on Facebook. There's a lot of times I just hit the unlike button and the unfriend button because I don't like what's being said and what's going on. Social media warriors or keyboard warriors love to get on there, and they love to tell us all about our business, don't they? I have people all the time telling me, because of my career choice, if I were you, this is what I would have done. Or I saw you guys arrested so-and-so. I wouldn't have done that. I would have done... Well, who are you to tell me what to do anyway? Right? First of all, we have applications. If you want to be me, come fill one out. We're hurting. Okay? Second of all, you don't know anything about my career choice. You haven't been to a police academy. You haven't been to the training. You haven't been doing this job for 17 years. You haven't dealt with the kind of headaches I've dealt with in the job. So tell me how to do my job. Okay? I don't care if you were me. I really don't. But people get on us that way all the time. They give you information. If I were you, I wouldn't raise my kid that way. If I was you, I would do it this way. Well, it's not your kid. If I were you, Cody, let me tell you how I'd deal with your relationship. This is what I would do. Okay? And I'm going to pick on Cody a little bit because Cody knows I love him and I'm okay with it. Cody, if I was you, I'd be careful about walking your tackle boxes. You don't fall in them. And... Oh, I love you, Cody. People tell us all the time, if I was you, and talk about our Christian experience and how we should experience God. It's not up to them. It's a personal relationship we have with God. Am I wrong? Amen. Each one of us approach God in a different way. We accept Him in a different way. We talk to Him in a different way. We have our own butterfly moment in a different way. We don't all do it the same. That's why we're unique. That's why we're individuals. A lot of times when people tell us, if I were you, they don't mean to do anything bad. After planning this sermon, I caught myself doing it this week. I have a brand new officer. He's like 12 years old, he seems like. We're all doing No Shave November. He can't, because he can't grow any facial hair. Okay? Nice, sweet kid, great officer. We call him Smiley because he smiles all the time. And I caught myself this week, hey, Officer so-and-so, man, if I was you, this is what I'd do on this. And then I thought, maybe I need to reword that somehow. And so I said, come to my office, let's talk about your case. These are some things you did really good, and you might want to consider if there's anything more you can do. And then he thought it through himself, and he came to the conclusion of the things he was missing out on, and he was able to resolve that himself. Was it a bad thing to say, if I was you, this is what I would do? Probably not. But if we find ourselves doing that all the time, we're going to drive people nuts. So, today, if I were you, I would stop with the if I were yous. All right? Now, most of you know, and if you're not, you've been blind to the world, that this year has been a tough, tough year on this country. It's been a tough year on all of us. We're still having to wear our masks. We're still having to wash our hands. It's probably not a bad thing to be washing our hands, folks, but... And it's really been a hard year on law enforcement. I've never seen a time quite like this where law enforcement officers are walking away from their jobs, walking away from their careers, walking away from their retirements in droves like they are in some of these big cities. I hate to see what's going to happen, Christy, in the next few months when law and order is out the window because there's nobody there to protect us anymore. Because guys are worried of their livelihood and their families and what's going to happen to them. And even here in Cottonwood, even though we're a small community, we have not been immune to the bad luck that's been going on. Never before have I experienced being on traffic stops and people driving by yelling vulgarities at me for doing my job. Every night, I smile and wave. Yeah, thank you. Love you too. I've never, in my career of 17 years now, have been to so many calls where people are trying to bait law enforcement into doing something stupid. They challenge us. They bait us every freaking day. And it drives me nuts, especially for our young officers who don't know how to handle it. These are good guys and gals. But people have been so emboldened lately that they feel that the laws don't apply to them, that they can do what they want to do. And we can't. We can't have a society like that. And then on top of that, you guys probably all know we've lost one of our commanders recently. Doing nothing but sitting on his motorcycle. Safest motorcycle rider I've ever known in my life. Wears every piece of safety gear there is when he would go out. Sitting at a stoplight, went drunk, decided he wanted to blow through 2 stoplights, cross over all traffic, go into an oncoming lane, and at about 60 miles an hour, hit our commander head on. Nothing he could do. He was killed instantly. And me being part of the accident team, the fatal accident team for Cottonwood PD, got called out with having no idea it was our commander until we were on scene with him for 10 minutes. One of our officers asked to give him chest compressions before we even knew who this was. And then it was devastating. And then earlier this year, and I've talked about this before, and I'm going to talk about this in a little more detail right now and give you a little bit more of insight on my end. We had an officer get shot this year. Now, we've had officer-involved shooting in Cottonwood before. I've been a part of 4 different investigations of officer-involved shootings here in Cottonwood, which you may not know of. Cottonwood gets a little western sometimes still. But this particular case, I want to give you a little bit more insight on from where I came from because it'll help you understand where we're going forward. And man, I'm going to run out of time, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep on going because this is important. I really don't care what you think about the time. Because if you were me, you'd probably keep talking too. All right. So, I got to get some humor in this, right? This is hard for me to get through. So the night of the officer-involved shooting, I was preparing to come to work. I was working a graveyard shift, 8 o'clock at night. I just left my house, kissed my wife goodbye, got in my police Tahoe, started out my driveway, went over the radio. I hear shots fired. And as a police officer, that's something you don't ever want to hear. Shots fired are bad. Whether we're doing the shooting or somebody's shooting at us, it's not good. Unlike the media wants to portray, we don't like shooting people. We don't want to shoot people, and we don't go out hunting and looking for people to shoot. It's an awful feeling when that comes out. I would love to go through my entire career without any violence, but that just doesn't happen. But I would love to. The next words that came over the radio were even worse. It was, I've been hit. Officer down. When that happens, officers come from every town imaginable. We had officers show up from Sedona, Camp Verde, Yavapai Apache, Clarkdale, Jerome, YCSO Sheriff's Office, DPS, Camp Verde Marshal's Office. They all came to Cottonwood because of that call. Now, I've got to tell you, on a normal day, coming from my house to the site of the shooting takes about 8 minutes. And if you know me and you've ever ridden with me, I don't do the speed limit. Ever. Okay? So it takes 8 minutes with me going slightly over the speed limit. That day, I made it from my house to the site of the shooting in under 2 minutes. In that time, the officer that was shot had worked his way back out to a prearranged extraction site where other officers were coming in. He organized the extraction site himself, told officers where to come. It was amazing that being shot, he still had the wherewithal to do that. And they put him in the back of a pickup truck and already had him to the hospital by the time I arrived on scene. Unfortunately, while he was in the back of the truck, he fell over from shock, and they had the tailgate down. The officer that was driving the pickup thought he fell out of the back of the truck and circled back to go find him. But he was still in the back of the truck. It's just kind of a funny side story. When I got on scene, I parked a couple blocks down the road, and I could look down the roadway, and I could see where the two police Tahoes were, where the shooting had taken place, and I could see a couple of our officers down there. I was the second officer on scene. There was 2 on scene when the shootings happened, and then 2 of us arrived. As I'm making my way down, there's a bunch of cars parked along the road, and I could see from the streetlights, I could see a trail of blood going between these cars. And then every once in a while, I'd see some shell casings. And what had happened is the officer was retreating. He was retreating behind these cars, and he was bleeding out of his arm. And he kept firing what we call suppressive fire back to keep the bad guy from shooting at him, because the shots, as I was coming to the scene, we were still getting reports that there were still shots being fired. The guy hadn't stopped shooting. He'd gone into his house and barricaded, but he hadn't stopped shooting. So as I'm getting there, I got to tell you, my anger seeing that became overwhelming. Because you got to understand, these officers, a lot of them we have now, like my little 12-year-old officer I'm dealing with right now, they're the same age as my own kids. They're the same age as you guys. If your kids, Wes, would you be mad if somebody tried to hurt one of your kids? Tried to kill one of your kids? These are my kids at work. I fight with these guys. I bleed with these guys. I cry with these guys. They're my family. And they're my kids because they're the same age as my kids. And these kids have kids. They're the same age as my grandbabies. So when something happens to one of them, I get really affected by it. And I got to tell you, I have no bigger goal in my job than to make sure that all of my guys go home safe at the end of the shift. When I don't know where my guys are and they go out and do something, as soon as they're done, the first thing they do is they get called into my office and they get it chewing like they would never believe because I didn't know where they were and what they were doing. Because I'm responsible for them. As their supervisor, I'm responsible. So as I got there, I got more and more angry the closer and closer I got and saw this blood trail. And thought this young officer with his young wife and his young family, his young kids, that somebody tried to take his life. And the anger was real. And as an elder of this church, I'm not sure, I probably should have let my anger get to that level. But I did, because I'm a human, and I have human emotions. And as I got to the front of the Tahoe, other officers came, and we surrounded. I've told you more of this story, but for the sake of time, I want to get to the ending of this story. It came time for us, we had the house surrounded, it came time for us to try to call this guy out of the house. While we were there, shots are still going off. We don't know where the rounds are going, but shots are still being fired. Scary situation. I'm still really mad. When I deployed out of my Tahoe, I grabbed my patrol rifle, one of those mean, nasty AR-15s that the media likes to talk about. Because you're taught when you're in law enforcement, if you wind up in a gunfight, you use your handgun. If you're going to a gunfight, you take your rifle. You do that because you get distance, and distance is your friend. You can stay further away and not get shot yourself if you have to be engaged in a gunfight. I know it sounds counterintuitive to have an elder be talking about being in a gunfight, right? God's wired me different, okay? I don't apologize for that. God put me in this position and He uses me, I'm telling you. And I'm sorry if my job might offend some people, but it's who I am. So I grab my rifle, I go up to the front of this Tahoe, and I'm kneeling down in front of this Tahoe. I've got my rifle pointed towards the front door because that's the area I was responsible for covering. I look over and I see bullet holes in this Tahoe, in this police Tahoe. How many shots was this guy firing at my guys? So now I'm beyond mad. I'm really, really ticked off. And my rifle has a red dot sight. If you know what a red dot sight is, it's a little tiny scope about this long. When you turn the red dot on, it puts a little laser dot inside the laser. It doesn't cast out to where the guys can't see where you're at. There's a little red dot. And all you have to do is you have to peek through that little scope, and if that red dot's on your target, that's where your bullet's going to go. So I had my red dot on, and I had it on the front door, and there were several of us there with rifles. The firing had stopped from inside the home. They get on the loudspeaker, the SWAT team does. They call the guy out. The door pops open. The guy comes out. It's dark. We can't see him real well, and he's got something in his hand. That's never good. So my rifle is also equipped with a laser sight that does shoot out. We don't use it very often because when your laser's on, it puts perfect light back to where you are. But because I was so angry and I had a perfect line of sight of this guy, I flipped on my laser. And I put a green dot right on his chest. And it's the first time in my life I had made a conscious decision that I could kill somebody. Now, there's plenty of situations where I've had to draw my weapon before, but it's a split-second thing. It's a training that kicks in. You pull your weapon. You might have shot somebody, but it was just instantaneous. It's just the first time I had a chance to think about it. And I wanted that guy to know, and I wanted him to see that green dot on his chest, that if that was a firearm in his hand and he tried to hurt any more of my officers, I would do what I needed to do to protect the people in that community and the officers on that scene. That's not a fun decision to make by any means. But once my green dot came on, I noticed about 20 other green dots come on because all the other officers were thinking the same thing I was. And his whole body lit up green. And he dropped to the ground, put his hands on his head, and was taken without incident, which is the way we would love for it to go. But I had to stay on the scene another 12 hours, helping with the investigation of the scene and collecting evidence and keeping people out of the area till we got the DPS shoot team up. And when I finally got done after the long, long day, I went home, walked the door, and I remember my wife asking me, "How you doing?" And I gave her a big hug, and I started sobbing, and I said, I just realized I had made up my mind that I was going to kill somebody today. And that's hard to deal with. Hard to deal with, not because of my job, because that's what I do as part of my job. That's what I'm trained to do. It was hard to do because of an elder of this church. As a Christian, that's not a decision I ever want to have to make. Now you find out where I'm at in my notes. So some of you are probably thinking, and it's okay if you are, wow, Todd, if I was you, I probably wouldn't have told that story in church. Being an elder, you probably should have kept that to yourself. Some of you are probably thinking, well, if I were you, because I hear this all the time, I would have put my laser sight on his arm or his leg. So if you had to shoot him, at least you weren't going to kill him. If you feel that way, next time we do our simulations training where we use paintball bullets to reenact scenarios, come out and go through the stress of that and try to shoot somebody in the arm or the leg when you're super stressed and when you're 100 yards away. It doesn't work. But that's okay if you feel that way. Some of you might say, if I were you, you know what, you're not me. This is something I have to deal with God on my own. Something I have dealt with God with on my own. I do every day. Every day of my job knowing this could happen again. But I love my job. I love the people I work with. I love my community. I love my church. And I will do whatever I need to protect it. I believe that God puts people in positions, regardless of what other people may think of that position, because He knows we need protectors too. We need protectors in our church. We need people out there that understand the church's side and the law enforcement side, because when we have situations here at the church, we better deal with them. The reason why I tell you the story is because I want you to know that most people, most Americans, will deal with a major critical incident 1.5 times in their lives. We're talking a major critical incident, something that's life-changing, life-defining, life or death situation 1.5 times in their lifetime. A police officer, on average, in a 20-year career, will deal with over 800 of those same kind of instances. So my point is this. I probably think different than most of you. Absolutely, when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I've got a lot of stuff up here that you don't want to know about. I've got a lot of stuff up here that affects the way I think. And when we're telling other people, like I said, I want you to feel sorry for me. I'm not telling this for my benefit. When we're telling other people, Cody, if I was you, do we know what Cody's going through right now? Do we know what he just could have gone through that might be affecting what he's doing right now, what he's saying right now? Cody, nice tattoo, buddy. If I was you, I wouldn't have done that. Right? Right? I'm sure you've heard that, right? Right? Do we know the purpose behind his tattoo? Do we know why he got that tattoo? Do we know what it means to him? Do we know what trials he might have been going through at the time he got that tattoo? Do we know? No, we don't. So stop with the if I were yous. Love Cody. We'll take the tackle box away, but we'll love Cody. Right? Right? You get my point? Every person we come in contact with is going through something in their lives. Something we don't understand. Something we probably can't even comprehend. So stop with the if I were yous. Just love people. They might be in their butterfly moment. They might be in their chrysalis trying to hatch out to be something beautiful. And the problem is, have you ever seen the little boy that sees the chrysalis and he sees that butterfly moving around? And he's like, "Ooh, a butterfly. I want to go help. I want to go help." So they go to the chrysalis and they crack it open and the butterfly comes out and he tries to stretch out a wing, but it's not quite formed. He tries to pump it full of blood, but he can't. Because the little boy didn't give it a time to fully develop. And then the butterfly falls out of the chrysalis onto the ground, where it withers up and it dies. We want to make sure we don't do that to people. We want to make sure people in their butterfly moment, trying to find God, trying to find love, we don't jump in to help them too much. Do they need love and support? Absolutely. If they have questions, do we need to help them? Absolutely. Do we need to point out their faults and say, if I was you, George, I wouldn't? No. Because all I'm doing is I'm crushing his butterfly moment and I'm not letting him develop. And that's what we need to be careful of. 8 months out of the year, I work nights now. I was working graveyards, now I'm on swing shift. You'd think that'd be better, but I worked until 2 o'clock this morning. But because of this incident I had with the shooting, I was feeling pretty terrible about myself. I wasn't real sure about things. And so because I'm working nights, I have a place I go, and I'm not going to tell you where it's at because it's a safe place for me where I can park my police Tahoe and I can get out and I know nobody's around. If anybody's approaching me, I can see them from miles away. So it's a safe place for me. And I go out there and I park my Tahoe at night because the stars there are just amazing. They're beautiful. And I get out of my Tahoe and I got Christian music playing on my radio. And I get out and I look at the stars. I hear the coyotes. I hear the owls. Beautiful. And that's the time I spend to talk with God. Now, this is the time I stop and pray with God. This is the time I stop and talk with God. And I tell him jokes, and he laughs. He does. He laughs. And we just have open, serious conversation about all kinds of things. About life, about my kids, about my grandbabies, about you guys. Anything that's going on, we just discuss it. And it's in those times I hear him the best because there's no clutter. And I'm sitting there one night and I'm talking to God. I got to tell you, you guys all know we have angels that watch out for us, right? You guys know that? You know mine are all in therapy? They are. They are. So don't think anything you're going through is not overcomable because I put my angels in therapy. Matter of fact, I'm sure when it's time to start their day, they draw straws and the short straw goes, "Oh, it's my turn." Oh, man. Okay. So that's the kind of moment I was having. I know my angels were like, oh man, here he goes again. But I'm sitting out there, and I'm thinking to myself, Lord, if I were you, I started, if I were you with God. I said, Lord, if I were you, I would have so given up on me by now. Why are you still even hanging on? Why are you even trying to? Man, I'm a mess sometimes. Why are you still around? Why have you just given up? Come on. Exactly. Because he loves me. And I know, like I said, I got all your angels that are help to protect me. They're all in therapy. This is bad. And at that time, a song came on the radio. And you may have heard the song, but I thought the song was very unique. I want to read the words to you, just the first part of the song. The song starts off, it was right after I said this to God. If I were you, Lord, I would have just given up. Well, why are you still doing so much for me? Why are you still so good to me? And these words came on the radio. If I were you, I would have given up on me by now. That's what came on the radio at that exact time. Now you tell me God's not talking to me and God doesn't laugh with me when I'm telling him my jokes. Right? He turned this song on at that exact time I said these exact words. When they came out of my mouth, they came out of my radio. And then the song continues. I would have labeled me a lost cause because I feel just like a lost cause. If I were you, I'd have turned around and walked away. I would have labeled me beyond repair because I feel like I'm beyond repair. But somehow, you don't see me like I do. Somehow you're still here. You're the God who stays. You're the God who stays. You're the one who runs in my direction when the whole world walks away. And I can really relate to that because as a police officer, when gunfire happens, I'll run to it every time when everybody else is running away. So I get that from God. I get how that love is there to run to us through danger, to whatever it takes, to get to us, to help us. Just like I did my officers when they were in trouble and one had been shot. It was a scary place to be, but I didn't think about that. I was running because there were still officers there that needed my help. And that's what God does to us. He'll run through anything for us to be there. You're the God who stands with arms open wide, and you're telling me nothing I have ever done can separate my heart from the God who stays. Now, isn't that love? Isn't that love? If Jesus doesn't turn, he doesn't walk away. He stays with us. He wants us to become like the caterpillar. Oh, I got a long ways to go. You're good. I'm telling you, I do these sermons that go 35, 40 minutes, and I practice them. They're 35, 40 minutes. I get talking, they go for hours. So you guys are in luck. You know, God wants to take us from our darkest moments, and he wants us to have our butterfly moments. And sometimes those butterfly moments might happen every day. Every day. Sometimes they might happen every couple weeks. Sometimes for some of us, they may take years, just like it does for the caterpillar. Now, some of you are asking, you know, this sounds really good. Sounds really good. But how do we know God has not turned around and just walked away from this crazy world? Why would he stay here? This world has gone completely nuts this past 9 months. Completely nuts. I don't think you've talked to anybody that said they've ever seen anything like this before. How do we know God's still here? Well, let me ask you guys this. Have you read this book? Have you read this book? Some people tell me this book is just full of old English and words that they don't understand. It makes no sense. Let me tell you what's in this book. In this book, for you ladies, in this book is love stories like you've never imagined. Romance novels that'll knock your socks off. They're in this book. For the guys, there's stories of superheroes, people of incredible strength in this book, guys that could not be defeated. There's amazing stories of epic battles if you're into that. Stuff that Hollywood couldn't even imagine. They're in this book. Spy novels. There's spy novels and spy stories in this book. They're there. There's stories of immense failures by others, far exceeding any of our failures we could ever do. Matter of fact, you look at some failures of people in the Bible and see how God still loved them at the end, you kind of go, huh, I'm not so bad. But the book ends with incredible love and acceptance through it all by a man named Jesus who never turned his back and never walked away. Never walked away from anyone, no matter how dark their lives might have gotten. If they were willing to love him, no matter where they came from, he's there for them. So I was actually going to look through a few of these stories today, but it would take us another half hour to do that. So instead, we'll just give you some quick examples. In Exodus 2, the story of Moses. We know the story of Moses as a baby sent out into the reeds, found by the Egyptian Pharaoh and family, and brought in and raised with the Pharaoh and raised in the palace and raised as a prince. But he was a Hebrew. And when he saw a Hebrew being abused, he got angry. And this is what helps me when I got angry. He got angry and he actually acted out and he killed the Egyptian guard and then buried him in the sand. And then Moses realized, whoopsie, that was a bad mistake. And Moses then, for years, he's one of those year caterpillars. For years, he went into his chrysalis until he became a butterfly. And then when he became a butterfly with all that baggage he had, he came back to Egypt and he freed the entire Hebrew nation. Even though at times they disliked him and they argued with him and they griped and they moaned and they complained about everything, he still led them. He led them through the Red Sea when God parted it for them and did immense miracles. That's what God does for us. No matter the mistakes we make, he far exceeds the love he gives back to us. Or how about the story of Samson? Right? Samson, man, his long, beautiful hair that gave him his strength, most powerful man to ever live. Attacked by a lion, grabs it by the mouth and rips it open. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Ah! Man, I'd love that. Right? But his strength was in his hair, his long, beautiful, blowing. I guess it was probably blowing too, but flowing hair. Right? And God gave him his strength. But Samson, being the kind of person he was, went out one night and met a lady of the evening. But God didn't take his strength. God still gave him his strength. God said, just don't cut your hair. Didn't mean what Samson did was right. And then Samson meets Delilah and he falls in love. She's a Philistine who's his enemies. You got to realize Samson's so cool that he killed thousands of these guys just using the jawbone of a donkey. He took on the whole army. Right? And their armor and their spears and their swords. He had a jawbone of a donkey. And he wiped them out. That's the kind of cool dude he was. Okay? But Samson, having a big ego, being full of pride, joked around with Delilah a couple times as she tried to find out the source of his strength. He finally told her it was his hair. Middle of the night, she cuts his hair, he loses his strength. The Philistines come in, they capture him. Samson's eyes are poked out. He's put into prison. They use him as a comedy relief. They bring him out when they're having their meetings and, look at Samson, this big powerful man. Now he's just, eyeless and weak and ha. And they're all meeting. And while Samson's in this prison time, he's having his butterfly moment. He's changing. He's realizing that his ego and his pride sent him over the edge. And he lost what God had given him because of that. And so they bring Samson out one more time. The palace is filled with all the Philistine leaders, wives, children, making fun of God. They're making fun of God, making fun of Samson's God. Our God's so much more powerful. Look what we did. We were able to capture Samson. And Samson's butterfly moment says, God, I know I've been a terrible person. I know you set me up for great things, Lord, and I've been terrible. I've had my butterfly moment. Lord, I love you. Please, Lord, one time, give me my strength back. As they bring Samson out, he asks to go to one of the pillars that holds up the palace and lean there against that pillar Samson feels that strength come back. And he says, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going with him, Lord. And he pushes the pillar over, and the palace falls on all those people that were mocking God because Samson had a butterfly moment. And not only Samson, there's other stories. They go on and on and on. David and Bathsheba, seeing a married woman from the rooftop taking a bath and bringing her to his palace and laying with her, and she winds up pregnant. Oh. He brings her husband home and he goes, I got this, I covered this up. Now understand, David, a man after God's own heart, but he's still making mistakes. He still makes mistakes just like we make mistakes. She brings Uriah home and says, hey, Uriah, you need to go home and visit your wife. Yeah, that'd be a good idea because then you've been on the battlefield. I know things are going to happen, and then people won't think that I got her pregnant, right? But Uriah is faithful to David, and he won't leave the palace. He refuses to go home to see his wife. And now David's like, this is a problem. So instead, he sends Uriah out to the front lines. He tells his generals, you find the most violent area of fighting going on, you put Uriah out there, you put him out in the front. And he does, and Uriah gets killed. Then he marries Bathsheba. He gets his life straightened out. He goes to his butterfly moment. David continues on to be a great king for God. But they make mistakes. You look up Queen Esther. She had her butterfly moment very early on in life. She didn't have a really dark time, but she still struggled with doing what God wanted her to do. She still struggled if she should step up to the king and talk to the king and tell the king that what he was doing wasn't right. And even though she had a hard time doing what God wanted, she eventually did, and God was there with her. Paul on the road to Damascus. New Testament, look it up, it's a great story. Killing and slaughtering and imprisoning thousands and thousands of Christians just because they were Christians. And on the road to Damascus, God strikes him down with a bright light and says, Saul, why are you torturing me? Why are you punishing me? Why are you doing this to me? And for 3 days, he was blind from the light. And in those 3 days, those 3 quick days, Saul had his butterfly moment. Changed his name to Paul. And became one of the most inspirational Bible writers that there was. Converted millions and millions of people to Christianity. Then, and he's still doing it now through his writings. You see, there's nothing we can do that God's going to turn his back from us on. Finally, the final story I want you to look at is the story of Jesus Christ himself on the Mount of Olives in the Garden of Gethsemane right before his crucifixion. He knew it was coming. He asked his disciples, please pray for me. And he went a short distance off. And there Jesus sat and he prayed. And he knew it was coming. And in Luke 22, verse 42, you don't need to look it up. You can look it up later if you choose. Jesus said, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, my will, but yours be done. Jesus knew it was coming. He knew he was going to have to sacrifice himself for all of us. He knew that was coming. It was so hard on Jesus that Jesus said, or the Bible actually says that Jesus sweat blood. Now, I've had kidney stones before, and that caused great pain, and it made me vomit blood. But I've never sweat blood. I can't imagine being in so much pain, so excruciating pain, and so much turmoil that I would sweat blood. And his disciples slept. They slept. But Jesus didn't walk away from them. He woke them up. He took them with him. He stayed with them. And then Jesus, knowing what was coming, got stripped of his clothing, got beaten, his back torn apart, to where he almost couldn't walk. Crown of thorns put on his head. He grabbed his cross, and he drug his heavy cross all the way to Calvary, where he laid down, willingly laid down, didn't fight like the thieves that were being nailed to the cross with him. He willingly laid down on the cross, let his hands and feet get nailed to the cross, where he then died. And he didn't die because of being nailed on the cross. If you remember the story, when the guard actually stuck a spear in him to make sure he was dead, blood and water came from his heart because he died of a broken heart. He died of a broken heart because of the sacrifice he made for every one of us. That he vowed he would never walk away from us. He would never leave us. He would always be with us. Regardless of what we would do, he would stay here with us. Regardless of the mistakes and the screw-ups we make, he'd be there with open arms. Wes, welcome back. Right? Every time. That's who he is. He died of a broken heart because so many of us will reject that. So many of us will refuse to have our butterfly moment. So many of us will refuse to just accept him and accept his love. And it broke his heart that we won't love him with all of our heart and with all of our soul and with all of our mind. So if I were you today, my prayer would be that I have my butterfly moment. And you may have to have that moment every day for a while, and that's okay. I have a butterfly moment quite often. And the second thing that I would say is if I were you, my only request leaving here was to please give me Jesus. Father, as we go from here today, I pray that you'll help us each one, Father, to have our butterfly moment, to learn to love you with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind. And most of all, Father, today our prayer is that give me Jesus. Let each one know his love, his support, and his sacrifice that he made for us. And help us learn to love him and love each other even more every day is our humble prayer. Amen.